going back to the draft for a second. Celebrini, I'm probably not even going to do a video on Celebrini because he's not going past one. It is so clear that there is one player in a separate tier, and that is Magnus Celebrini. However, there are other players who could theoretically be available. Now, we're going to start with Ivan Demidov. This is a guy who I think he's probably a wing, but I have talked to some people who are believers that he could play center at the NHL level. So I'm not going to remove him out of that top tier center entirely. I think there are more believers that he could be a center than I thought there were. Let me put it that way. I personally think he's a wing. Also, he's not going to be there at 12 either. I think it would be shocking if he slips out of the top 5.
It really seems as if he's going, 2 or like top 5, and it ain't going to be 5.
Exactly.
You know?
That's the way it seems like this is leaning. Even if Chicago passes on him, I don't think he gets past 5 or 6. The next 3, though, Caden Lidstrom, Berkly Catton, Konsta Helenius, these are guys that are in that like 2 through 14 or 15 tier. And if the draft shakes out in a certain way, I would say especially Catton and Helenius, because I do think that Lidstrom he's big, he's physical, he's got the production. He dealt with injury this year, but I would find it very difficult unless like his medical shows something seriously concerning in the lead up to the draft. I would find it very surprising if he slips out of the top 10. Catton and Helenius, though, are the 2 centers.
It's Caden Lindstrom is going 6th in Pronman and Wheeler's draft on the Athletic.
That sounds about right.
Their mock. They have him going to Utah at 6.
Yeah, I would think he would be gone by like 8 in a worst case scenario. I'm expecting him to be a top 5 pick. Catton and Helenius, though, if the draft shakes out the way I'm talking about everybody takes defenseman, one or both of those guys could be available. And the especially interesting guy here is Berkly Catton. You just mentioned the Corey Prom and Scott Wheeler mock draft they posted on The Athletic this morning. They have mocked one Berkly Catton to the Philadelphia Flyers at number 12.
They do. And they have the pick before that, Buffalo taking Carter Yakimchuk. So I will be hurt by that. But then, as you know, you've done a ton of research here, and I've been doing some reading as well. And I'll tell you, I'm really starting to like this Berkly Catton guy. Like, they have Cole Iserman going 13, and he's like the shiny toy everyone wants because it's like we're familiar with him. Like, we've seen him. Like, he's just somebody everyone's had their eye on for about a year, it seems like. But Berkly Catton, man, it really feels. This is not the first time I've seen his name mentioned with the Flyers, kind of being in that area right there at 12.
Yeah. I think, to me, the reason why Berkly Catton excites me, look, if he slips to 12, it's because of his size. He's a small player. When you're small, and you're as small as he is, he's like 5'10", 5'11". He's thin. He needs to bulk up to be sure. When you're a small player, there's always going to be concerns that he's not going to be able to stick down the middle. And that's fair. You never know. Sometimes small centers can't hold in the middle, and even if they become good players, they have to move over to wing. That's possible. But for me, number one, he's a really fun player to watch. I think the skill level is extremely high, but I also think that stylistically he does really fit what the Flyers need, in that he's a really, really creative high-end passer. How much have we been talking over the past few months about, like, now the Flyers have all these shooters, they don't have anybody to get them the puck.
It's truly unbelievable.
Catton is an extremely creative playmaker, and he's a high-end skater. Like, this is a fast playmaker.
And that's this team, I think they need a lot, and I am a believer in, listen, I don't think you need all Eric Lindros out there. Like, those dudes are hard to come by. I am a believer, if there's 2 guys I have rated equal, I want the bigger dude.
Yeah.
But this team needs some freaking speed, man. Like, they need to be able to play with that pace, and John Tortorella wants it. Like, he wants a team that can get up and down the ice.
Well, somebody asked me on Twitter today, because I was talking about Catton this morning, and somebody asked me, what's the difference between Berkly Catton and Morgan Frost? Both undersized centers, both very much lean towards the playmaking sides of their games, both have really good hands. What's the difference? Isn't Catton just another Frost? And the big difference I see between the two is that, and Frost has gotten better at this, he's worked really hard, is that Catton plays so much faster. Like Morgan Frost, the
He's
big
deliberate.
thing for years was the pace. He's a good skater. He's actually a very fast skater when he wants to be, but he plays slow too often. He's gotten better at it. He moves his feet a lot more. He's improved overall as a player because it took him 5-6 years to work at that. Catton does everything at top speed. And look, all of these guys that play in juniors are going to need to learn to play with a little bit more pace because they don't have to. They don't have to play fast all the time. But you watch his game tape, and the plays that he makes at speed are pretty ridiculous. And I watch those and I say, that's what Morgan Frost can't do. Morgan Frost can't make that. He can make that pass, but he can't make that pass at that pace.
It's one of the things we're like, okay, if Morgan Frost is going to stand out, it's on the power play because you get to be a little bit more deliberate there. And I do want to see a team that is more constantly in motion and pushing the defense with that speed rather than yes, Claude Giroux was excellent at it and it worked, but just okay, let's see who's open, get it back to me that half court stands. That doesn't work all the time. Sometimes you need to be pressuring the defense with speed, and that's something the Flyers badly need.
I also think, too, and they've gotten faster. Obviously, Konechny's a good skater.
Considerably faster.
Owen Tippett is one of the fastest straight-line players in the NHL. We saw it by that tracking software that the NHL uses now. But with the way the Flyers play, the way they've changed up their style, now it's more of an attacking, rush-based style. Someone like Berkly Catton is even more intriguing to me now because now it's not like he is going to be shackled the way he would have been 2 seasons ago when Torts was in his first year, the way that he would have been when Alain Vigneault was basically preaching a forecheck only offense. Now, Catton, who is a really good rush player, he would be able to be let free. And I'm not saying that Catton doesn't have flaws. There are reasons why he would slip to 12. Number one, the size. Number two, he doesn't have, he scores a lot of his goals via, dangles and in close. He's not much of a shooter. Obviously, there's concerns about center. He doesn't have a lot of physicality to his game, but I watch him and I think to myself, I could see him pairing well with Michkov because Michkov at his core is a goal scorer. And my thing is who's going to get him the puck in dangerous areas. I think Catton could do that. And he brings the dynamic flashiness that I think this team so desperately needs, the ability to change a game in one shift that this team just lacks right now.
Now, that's what I wanted to ask about, the potential pairing of a Catton with Matvei Michkov. In the mock draft, they say, ideally, the Flyers might want to add a little size to put with Michkov because he's not the biggest guy.
No, in an ideal world, you have Berkly Catton's talent and skating in a 6'4" frame. Yeah. That would be great.
Do you think
but if that was the case, he wouldn't be a 12.
Yes.
He wouldn't be a possibility at 12.
Fair enough. He might be going 2.
Yeah.
Do you think that is a potential drawback? We've seen the undersized center work. The GM of this team was an undersized center, but he had his most success with the Flyers. All right, you know what? We're going to give him Scott Hartnell. We're going to give him Braden Shen.
Right.
A guy who can get to the middle of the ice, do the forechecking, just be more of a physical presence alongside the one undersized guy. Do you think pairing Catton with Michkov, there's maybe potentially a draw, but if he's there, that's maybe the reason they don't take him?
Could be. It certainly could be. And again, I'm dreaming on this Catton Michkov pairing. Just because you take Catton, it doesn't necessarily mean he has to be Michkov center.
Sure, yeah.
You just want to get high-end players. But yeah, I could see them looking at it and saying that would be too little size at the top of our lineup. That's certainly possible. And given the defensemen that are going to be available, if there's a scenario where both Catton and Yakimchuk are available, I could see them being nah, we want the big physical defenseman with great puck skills who can rack up points and has really good straight line speed. I could see them making that decision, and maybe they thinking, because you've mentioned this a few times, maybe they would be thinking there's more centers next year. We'll get our Michkov center in next year's draft. Yeah. Let's get the defenseman with the 1D ceiling now because we don't know the next time we're going to have that opportunity. I could see that. But Catton is a guy where I watch him, and in a lot of ways, he's kind of exactly what I personally think the Flyers need. Now, if their scouts come back to Danny Briere and they say, we don't think he sticks a center at the NHL level. Then he's a lot less interesting to me. He's still a real good player. I would still love to have Berkly Catton as a winger, but he's obviously more valuable to the Flyers as a center.
Yeah.
And if the Flyers don't believe he can stick at center, then that would be another reason to pass on him. I'm obviously not in the room. I don't know what their scouts' evaluation of him is, but that would be another reason where they could say, really good player, we respect him, but just not quite the right fit for us. For me, I see a guy who I don't think he's ever going to be a defensive stalwart at center, but I think he could be good enough where he doesn't get crushed. And then with all the offensive upside he has, like he reminds me a little bit of another guy who I liked a lot over the last couple of years in the draft. He reminds me a bit of Logan Cooley.
Okay.
And I was very, very high on Logan Cooley.
We all silly like the mayor.